Hello, and thanks for joining us. This is the first of what will hopefully become an ongoing series of broadcasts from Microsoft. Our intent is to share with you technical information that will help you design bigger, better, and faster applications, and also to leverage technologies on the web. In this first episode, we're going to talk about XML. We'll also learn about BizTalk, the technology that is based upon the XML infrastructure. Then we'll meet with system architects, designers, as well as programmers to help get some insights on where XML came from, where it's going, and how BizTalk uses XML. And finally, we will talk with a programmer about why he chose XML to successfully solve his specific development problem, and walk through a demo of his implementation. But first, let's take a look at the latest Microsoft technology headlines.
Hello, I'm Erica Wiechers. Welcome to MSDN News Update. Microsoft recently announced the availability on their website of the Windows DNA Interoperability Center. This set of resources is designed to provide developer-focused resources for simplifying the development of composite applications in heterogeneous environments. The goal of the Windows DNA Interoperability Center is to give enterprise developers access to sample applications, including an end-to-end e-commerce application that seamlessly integrates the Windows DNA framework with a wide variety of non-Windows environments. Located on the site is access to interactive demonstrations and additional technical resources for integrating with an extensive range of applications and enterprise systems such as CICS and IMS transaction monitors, Oracle and DB2 databases, ERP systems, and other vendor-specific platforms. The Windows DNA interoperability techniques described are available from the Visual Studio development environment with any of the programming tools, including Visual Basic, Visual C++, Visual J++, and Visual Fox Pro. The Microsoft Windows DNA Interoperability Center is located at msdn.microsoft.com, WAC vStudio, WAC Interop. The Microsoft Research Group recently performed connectivity tests to the networking backbone that supports Internet 2. Internet 2 is a joint university industry project that is implementing new ways to provide high bandwidth information services as well as applications. Internet 2 will start out as an exclusive resource for research universities, but in the future, these technologies and services will be extended for use by other companies as well as consumers. Bandwidth tests show that a speed increase of as much as 45,000 times that of conventional dial-up methods may be available to everyone based on this technology. Already, astronomers, biologists, as well as a variety of other scientific pursuits are making use of this technology to attain information transfer speeds that enable them to perform extremely data-intensive processing and collaboration. Additional information about Internet 2 can be found from their website, www.internet2.edu. An important part of developing applications for Windows 2000 is to provide verification to the end users that the applications are well behaved and will properly work within the Windows environment. Microsoft has recently updated its certification program and requirements to address the capabilities and expectations that Windows 2000 provides for applications to take advantage of. The Gartner Group, external technology and evaluation consulting firm, recently reviewed the Windows 2000 certification requirements and has published a report in which they estimate that organizations will be able to reduce their total cost of ownership by 27% per user by using logo-compliant applications. Gartner suggests that developers should adhere to the application specification for Windows 2000, whether they intend to be certified or not. They recommend that enterprises ask vendors of non-certified applications to detail any areas where they do not comply with the specifications and explain why. More information about the Windows 2000 certification process, along with a pointer to the report by the Gartner Group, can be found at msdn.microsoft.com/WAC certification. An important milestone was recently reached when OmniPage Pro 10, the leading OCR application for Windows produced by CARE Corporation, became the first application to receive Windows 2000 certification. CARE was the first out of many companies that are currently in the process of being certified by Veritest, the third-party certification firm that has been contracted by Microsoft for performing impartial and unbiased certification of applications. More information about submitting your application to Veritest can be found at the Veritest website, www.veritest.com, WAC MS Logos, WAC Windows 2000. And that's been MSDN News Update. I'm Erica Wiechers.
Unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've been hearing all over the place, why XML is taking the world by storm. But you may not understand exactly what XML is and why the technology specifically addresses your needs in your applications and the solutions you're developing for your customers. In today's show, I'd like to try to share with you some of that information to help you better understand XML and the various technologies that are based upon XML. To help us understand this, I have got Adam Bosworth here. Adam, you're the General Manager of Database Access at Microsoft, correct?
That's correct.
Now, as I understand, you've actually got a pretty long history with XML even before it was known as XML.
Well, yeah. About almost 4 years ago, we looked at the web and asked ourselves, what is the implication of the web in terms of applications? And for the first time, it was possible for any application anywhere to talk to any other set of data, any other set of information, and any other application anywhere. And we had to think through what was the right architecture for letting these applications do that. The key point is, of course, that you never know who you're going to be talking to, and that the system will change enormously over time as new people become available on the web, applications change, implementations change. And we went looking for a way for applications to share information with each other that would work on the web, that was flexible, that was super easy, and yet that could handle the richness of data that we might want. It might be anything from geological data to genetic information to a purchase order to a doctor's write-up to prescriptions.
Now, to a certain extent, what you described is basically what I would consider just web pages. How is this different than web pages?
Well, the big issue here is you want the application to understand the data as data, not as user interface. You want it to say, oh yes, I know how to pull out the exact millimeters for the prescription so that your pharmacist gets it right. You want the application that's buying the stock to know right away what the stock is. The stuff that moves around the web today, HTML, describes how to display things on screens, how to put up a user interface, but doesn't describe things in a way where a program can go, oh yes, I know that this is the stock name, this is the stock price, and this is the quantity you want to order.
So instead of where the web page has the user as the target, if you will, XML and this whole database modeling is focusing on having a programmatic interface?
That's right. This was really about programs talking to programs. Except that this time we were talking about millions of programs talking to data found in millions of other programs. And we need to come up with a standard that would work on the web, and that meant a standard that was very easy, very flexible, and very open. And at the time we were looking for this, an effort was just starting in the World Wide Web Consortium to make a standard that was called XML. Now, the standard had been primarily targeted at documents. How did you take the existing HTML documents and make them more easy? We came down to the World Wide Web Consortium and said, we think there's a much broader application for this idea. The broader application is moving all information of any sort, no matter how rich in its structure and content, across the web between programs. Would you be interested in broadening the charter and incorporating Microsoft as a key developer and designer of the standard? And there was general agreement that they would, and we were a key member and charter member of the World Wide Web Consortium on XML from then on.
So originally XML was primarily just to be a better HTML than HTML.
Well, actually, there was another somewhat more obscure standard called SGML, and it was originally designed to replace that. But it was still very focused on the idea that there were documents, things like Boeing aircraft manuals or Army manuals for deployment in the field, not about moving any kind of information between applications. And where we came in is we looked at this and said, this is a much more broad reach. This can actually be a general architecture that will work very well on the web for moving any kind of information from anywhere to anywhere.
So by going anywhere to anywhere like that, that's kind of the same sort of idea that the web is doing, taking documents from anywhere to anywhere, from one server to a user, no matter where they might be at. So you're not saying the same sort of approach is being used for data, processes, applications, and services?
Exactly. We're saying that you can wire up applications across the entire web. They get information from anywhere, any other application anywhere on the web, and talk to any other application anywhere on the web. And this is essential if the web is really going to be the backbone for businesses talking to businesses and organizations talking to organizations in the way that we all hope that it will.
Now, when you say application, are you meaning web applications, traditional type thing today, or something other than a web application?
Well, it can be a combination. For example, imagine that my doctor enters my prescription. A system that the doctor has entered into could then go and talk to a pharmacist, even possibly find out who had the best price, and then send that request for my prescription to my pharmacist. And that would be a system talking to a system, but over the web. But those two systems might not even have a normal web front end, depending on what they were doing.
Today, if let's say your doctor wanted to do something like that and wasn't using the web at all for the backbone, they might have some sort of proprietary connection model with modems, dialing modems, and doing the handshaking and passing the data back and forth. And so XML is focusing on trying to leverage the existing internet infrastructure for that data passing.
That's right. In fact, today they probably wouldn't have an infrastructure at all. But if they did have one, it would be proprietary. But that model doesn't scale. You can't get to any doctor anywhere on the web. You can't incorporate drugstore.com, etc. So in order to generalize it, you really do need to take advantage of the web. In order to do that, we needed this very open, easy model.
So let's say I'm an application developer and I've got something I'm doing, and right now I'm not really that web focused. What should I be paying attention to understand what XML can do for me?
Well, I think the first thing that you're going to ask yourself is what kinds of information would people ask of my application, and figure out what XML grammars you would be publishing when people walked up and asked for them. For example, if you were a purchase order system, people would ask for purchase orders. If you're a medical system, they might ask for medical history. So the first thing you're going to be asking is what schemas of XML messages should I be supporting? Because ultimately, what's very important to you is you figure out how people are going to ask for your information, and then you make sure you support that model.
Let's say I was a game application, which is something that kind of breaks out of the model you just described. Is there something that I can make use of XML in a game?
Well, absolutely. Games typically share these days a lot of information across the web. They share the nature of where each player is, what each player is doing, the various weapons they have at their disposal. They may even let them talk to each other. Right now, there are private channels required for a lot of this information, and there aren't good sort of standard ways to move that information around. But over the next year, you're going to see the XML transporting information become an absolute backbone for the web, and it'll be increasingly silly to write your own custom code to move this kind of information around when you have this very rich, very standard way to move shared information across the web from point to point.
So what would a developer do today to actually implement XML in their application? Are there just simply function calls they need to make or services they need to incorporate?
Well, today it's fairly straightforward, but it's kind of low tech. You would write some code that would generate the appropriate XML. That's just a big bunch of text. Or if someone sends it to you, you would use an API we call the DOM, the Document Object Model, which is a World Wide Web Consortium standard for getting at that data. Or you would run a mapping process, what we call XSLT, or custom code, to convert that into the data model that you understand in your program. So in short, you would generate text to ship out very much as you generate pages, except that this text is XML, it's not HTML. Or when the data came in, you would use this API to get at it.
So you're essentially just talking about importing and exporting data as well as access to processes?
Well, yeah. The way to think about it is if someone's going to move some information your way, or you're going to move some information someone else's way, ultimately they need to process it or store it for querying. In order to do that today, they're going to write some custom code. They can write that code using active server pages. They can write that code using ISAPI processes. They can write that code using Perl. It actually doesn't matter. But in the long run, it would be nice if a lot of that code didn't have to be written, and the schema for the messages were rich enough, and the knowledge of your application was rich enough that it would happen for you automatically.
So all you have to do is understand the type of information and the format of information you have, submit a mapping layer, a translation schema to the system, and it automatically happens for you.
That's right. Now, it's important to understand that the system needs to be loosely coupled.
And by that you mean what?
Well, what I mean is, over time, you never know who you're talking to, and you should not ever write in hardwired assumptions about how they implemented their back end. If you do that, you're very fragile. The moment they change their implementation, you'll break. So what happens is you assume that the way that they implement isn't what matters. It's the XML message that's coming across the wire that matters. And the same thing's true for you. You map that XML message to your implementation. Over time, your implementation may change, but the message will not. So the mapping layer is very important. It's very important you have this code or schema to describe how you do this. But it's only your business. You should never export that information out, because as soon as you've done that, you've exported information about your implementation, and then when you change your implementation, as inevitably over time you will, the code that you've sent out will be wrong.
So as long as the data packets have the same type structure of data, You can take and change from using a SQL Server database for storing the information and retrieving it. You can move it up to doing VB script or C or Perl or whatever, even on a totally different system. And as long as those data packets stay pristine, you know you can go send in information anywhere they had it before.
That's right. It becomes a message-centric environment where the message is king and you decide how to operate with the message. But the message doesn't reflect your implementation. Your implementation reflects how you talk to the message. Now, we've made this sound a little harder than it is because we deliberately built XML when we built it to be flexible so that over time other information could come along that you might not have expected or even anticipated when you first wrote the message. But in XML, it's very easy to tell which is which. There's a concept called namespaces in XML, and you can qualify the new information that wasn't anticipated when the message was first designed using these namespaces so that your code can very quickly say, oh yes, this is the stuff I understand and I need to get out of the message. And this other stuff I don't understand, and I either just store and forward or I discard, depending on what I'm trying to do.
So that's touching on some of the future designs that are being built into XML. Where do we see XML moving?
Well, there's, I think, three key things that are coming to fruition over the next year or two in XML that haven't happened yet. One big one is schema. XML, when it was originally designed, had a very simple way to describe how the message looked, and it was called a DTD, or document data type. And that's not a very rich language. It's not a very powerful way to describe these messages. Take the simplest example. If I move a request for stock around, I can't tell that the quantity is an integer and that the date that I moved the request was made was a date. We're moving very quickly, and this is part of an XML working group called the XML Schema Group, to a much richer language for describing XML documents where we can tell everything about the message. We can tell what the data types are, we can tell what the rules are and the shape requirements and so on. And I think that the schema effort will, over the next year or two, be a very, very important part of this architecture. The second thing that we're moving towards is a query model. As people move information around, they naturally start storing it, and then they want to query it. They want to find the relevant data in it. They want to find which documents or which XML messages meet certain criteria.
So providing a built-in filtering mechanism.
So, well, actually, I would say even more richly. Querying is both filtering and its other operations like sorting and structuring. We're a charter member of a new World Wide Web working group called the XML Query Language Working Group that's just getting started to build a query language so that as we all start to store and manage XML in large quantities, we have a language for accessing this information. And then lastly, there's links. There has been for quite a while a working group trying to work on links. And by links, I mean the idea that one XML message can refer to another.
Similar to like a link on a web page.
Similar to a link on a web page. For example, I might want to create a message that says, this other message has the following characteristics. And I can't change the other message. It's not mine, and I don't control it. So instead, I want to write references to it. The standard out there has been coming to fruition a little more slowly than we all would have liked, but it is coming to fruition. And that will also be a very important technology over the next year or two in the XML technology kit that we give everyone for sharing out information around the web.
So now, with all this work being moved towards the current model of XML and what's going on in the future, are people actually using XML today to solve problems?
Yeah, they're beginning to. I would say for a year there was a lot of experimentation and learning, but now every day we have new customers coming to BizTalk talking about their schemas and what they want. The financial institutions are very rapidly moving towards using XML to move trade requests and other kinds of information around the web. The medical community is beginning very rapidly to use XML to move medical information around. So we're seeing the first really serious uses of XML start up this year.
Now, you mentioned BizTalk. What exactly is BizTalk?
Well, BizTalk is two things, and I'm not really the expert to talk about both of them. But conceptually speaking, it's both a way to describe the schemas for these messages, and then there's going to be technology to actually help you route these messages around and process them as you move them from business to business.
So it seems that with BizTalk being such an integral component of what's going on, it probably make a lot of sense to bring Dan in and talk with him about what BizTalk is and why it's really solving some problems for the businesses.
Yes, I think that'd be an excellent idea.
So we have with us here Dan Rogers, the program manager for www.biztalk.org, a website that Microsoft is participating in very heavily for exposing BizTalk information onto the web and to different companies. Hi, Dan. Adam and I have been talking about XML in general, where it's going, what it does for developers, and Adam was talking about BizTalk. Now, I understand you actually know quite a bit about what BizTalk is and how people can use it.
I sure do. BizTalk is a way to use XML. It defines a convention. And so the other parts of BizTalk are the BizTalk framework, which is a set of guidelines for using XML to answer a few key questions that if you're going to do loose coupling, you're going to want to have answered as you start to examine a message.
Okay, so I guess putting this in web-style terms, if I mentally could envision the structure of an HTML document, the tags and the attributes and stuff like that, HTML 3.5 or 4.0 is an implementation of that structure, and so BizTalk is an implementation of XML as a structured environment?
Well, what XML does is it gives you a way to define tags. What it doesn't cover, the standard doesn't cover, what are the names of the tags. So if you're going to design an application that's going to process information, you've got to make up your schema, which defines your tags. Now, if everybody had made up their own schema and their own structures, there's going to be information that if you're building an application that's going to process information as it comes along, it has to learn to recognize each document. And what the BizTalk framework does is give you a recognition framework for being able to manage business data and making requests and making responses to and from your partner applications. And those questions are things like, who's this from? What is it? What do they want? Am I supposed to respond? Is it secure? Things like that.
Okay, so let's say I've got an application, and my application is only talking to other code that I've developed myself on my servers. BizTalk might not necessarily specifically solve a problem for me, but if I'm trying to talk to someone else's application on some other server, is that where BizTalk is coming in?
Well, I think even in those cases where you've got the opportunity to make a wholly proprietary implementation that's totally optimized to your need, you may want to examine the BizTalk framework if you're going to use XML, because there's going to come a time when you say, let's open these applications up and make these services exposed to broader audiences. And if you're not using some convention that is widely used, then you're going to have to write additional logic and an additional mapping layer to go to and from the application that you've just created.
So almost any application then that's doing any sort of data transports, whether it's between themselves or other applications, BizTalk makes a lot of sense, if for no other reason than like an insurance for future designs.
That, and it's kind of our sweet spot that we've targeted with the framework, is for applications to communicate in a loose coupled way.
So now how does biztalk.org fit into this? What does it provide exactly?
BizTalk.org is two things. It's a website where people can come and learn about XML. It's a website where people can come and discuss XML. But it's also a schema library where people can go and find out, hey, my partner company that I want to do business with, well, what's the technical information that I need to use to be able to do business with them? One of the barriers to adopting XML is to being able to discover, if you want to do business with Walmart or Ford, what is the schema that you have to be able to understand before you can actually start to interoperate with their systems.
It's almost like a programmatic interface to what you might call an entry form or a paper form that someone's filling out where it says, fill your name in here, fill your address in here, and fill your zip code in there. I can make the mapping of what my information I've got internally onto that piece of paper and then pass it into the company.
Very much so. I often describe it to people that ask as more of a corporate, not a corporate, but the municipal clerk. When you go to municipal clerk, there's a window you go to there where if you submit forms, you may have forms for paying a ticket. I have those. You may have forms for doing a building extension on your house. I want to get married. Those kinds of services are all provided by that clerk behind the window. But if you don't bring the right form to the clerk doesn't know what to do. This kind of approach saves you from having to know which office door in the municipal building that you're supposed to deliver that form. The clerk provides you that routing service.
Okay, so let's assume that I'm an application programmer and I've got something I'm doing that's keeping track of information or services. What do I need to do to actually take advantage of BizTalk?
Well, let's say I want to sell things over the web. That's a real, for business to business kind of maybe corporate purchasing. I don't want to have to expose a web page to do that, because each corporate purchasing system out there that I want to do business with will have its own front-end web page, and they're not going to want to host my web page. Corporations like to have a consistent look and feel. They've designed them in-house, and yet they want to be able to send me purchase orders, do queries against the kinds of what's the status of my order, what's the shipping date, and they also want to be able to receive shipping information when something's about to ship or has shipped. So these are services. So if you're a provider of services, You want to first model what your services are, and then you'll want to write a schema to model what will each of those service requests or those forms look like.
So then this is kind of the same sort of process any application developer really should be going through anyway, just to identify exactly the information they have within their application. And BizTalk is just another small layer on top of that that is formalizing that approach.
It's a convention more so than a formality. One thing we do in the BizTalk framework is we define it, what we affectionately refer to as an envelope. And it's basically information about the routing, what convention is in use, who's it from, but then we leave open a place via an XML open model where you say stick your schema here. So we become more like a postal envelope for moving information around over any transport. We think most people will use HTTP initially, but a lot of companies will want a lot of flexibility. And what we want to be able to do is provide the same message request response structure can be used over any physical transport like email or HTTP, things like that.
What do I do next? How do I make this available to people?
Well, you're going to have to put up a service point. You probably will do that through your web server, which means you're going to have to build some software. You're going to have to build some entry point for where messages come in. You'll define any number of entry points. Those are those physical protocols I talked about.
This would be similar to having a form on your website and what the action item is for that form, which
Right.
is sometimes a CGI application or an ASP script or Perl script or something like that that's taking that input from the user and doing something with it.
Right. But in an XML, in just a pure XML perspective, you're going to have some entry point. Maybe it's an ASP page or an ISAPI filter if you're running IIS that someone HTTP posts an XML string to. And then you have to pick up from there. You have to, it's almost like your program is blind, and this is why we've got these enveloping conventions. Somebody just sent you XML. XML is really great, but it's a lot like ASCII. I can design any structure with any number of tags, and if you don't have some kind of convention, what you're left with is having to write the program that can say, oh, I can process any document and recognize it and know how to process it. So by defining your schemas that you're going to use that match your business processing, and by using a convention that is shared widely about who's it from, what do you want, was it supposed to get to me, you'll be able to start the process of figuring out what you're being requested to do. Another complexity that you have, let's say if you're doing object-oriented type approaches to app-to-app interop, is by defining methods and objects, you're actually defining multiple entry points into your application. This is the fragility that Adam talked about before, where the sender has to know exactly where in an application to begin, what are the semantics, what are the method names, what are the arguments, what are the correct data types. All of those things become very, very difficult as the number of instances of your messages or your partners increases. And they also, if you go that way, you limit the number of changes that you can make down the road. An object once deployed like that can never be taken down. But we all know that developers rev objects every day. So what happens is a partner that's using a tight coupled approach ends up saying, oh, they're not there anymore. It doesn't work. The store is closed. I'll get another partner. In business-to-business e-commerce, you can't afford to do that. So what we're trying to do is get ahead of the game and say, let's go a single entry point on a given transport and loose couple the operation identification. That's what the BizTalk framework's for. In order to make that take off, you'll need a discovery mechanism so that you can go find out what are the schemas you need to use, and assuming people are using a similar convention, the BizTalk framework, you'll know you've got a starting point that you can start to use their schemas. BizTalk.org addresses that discovery mechanism.
So it's kind of being a clearinghouse.
You can think of, that's about what we are right now. To say, if your boss comes to you and says, I want to be online, I want to be doing business-to-business purchasing with such and such a system, and I want it tomorrow, BizTalk.org is the place to start. We not only give you the technical information to understand what that partner is using and how you have to talk to them, but we're actually now giving away tools to help you get there.
What sort of tools?
Well, it was not about 2 weeks ago we released our first revision of what we call the BizTalk Jumpstart Kit. And this is targeted initially at the developer that's used to the Microsoft Visual Studio product line and wants help in using XML schema in their applications. And they want help architecting scalable, rigorous XML applications that they can just bolt onto the existing applications.
So it's kind of like a WYSI tool they can use within their Visual Studio environment for accessing the data and processing the schema and kind of building it up in a structure.
Right. There's some NT services, there's some infrastructure, there's some administrative tools, there's some database images, and there's wizards that you plug into the Visual Studio environment for building schema managers for being able to create XML that exactly matches the schema that you may have just downloaded. So you can either create or consume XML in a given form through a nice friendly COM interface that a VB script programmer might be used to, as well as tools for building database adapters that manage the ADO code, so we can start to migrate people towards more automated ways to deal with database input and output.
And this is something you should go to the BizTalk.org website and download directly.
Yeah, there's a page on the BizTalk.org website called Resources. Click there, click on the Tools link, and you'll see the parameters and a description of the prerequisites you need to use the toolkit.
So are companies actually starting to use the BizTalk model to expose information?
My mailbox is flooded with companies that want to do pilots, that are starting pilots, and from Microsoft consultants that are just starting to use the toolkit to build things with their customers.
Where do you see BizTalk moving forward then? What does the future hold for what BizTalk can offer, this whole business-to-business model?
Well, the BizTalk server is our product future initially. I think long-term you'll find that each and every Microsoft product is going to have an XML story. We're taking XML very, very seriously, and many of our products will expose BizTalk-type services and plug into the BizTalk server. From a BizTalk.org perspective, my mission there is to provide technology solutions to lower the entry costs and the technical barriers to XML takeoff.
So then any of our audience out there that wants more information about BizTalk, probably the best place to go is www.biztalk.org.
That's a great starting point.
Documentation, tools, the repository library.
It's a library.
And what else might they find out there?
You can find white papers. In the near future, you'll find lots of developer-focused content that we're going to be delivering over the next couple of months. People that want to learn about schemas and learn about what other companies are doing just to get in the know, come to the library, look around. There's lots to learn there. Ideally, everyone won't make their own schema. How many purchase order schemas do we need? So another great way to use the library is to say, I want to do this kind of a thing. Go find one that's out there that meets your need, that's good enough. Download it, use the toolkit, plug into your application, do a pilot, use it.
Does it provide ways of getting access to other developers that might also be doing BizTalk type stuff so I can talk to them back and forth?
Absolutely. There's a community area where there's a web-hosted discussion group where people are asking questions on any number of topics. And it's exciting to see people actually starting to now, customers of my website, and that's what I call customers, coming there and taking over. There's actually little moderators, there's moderators that are starting to take over because they know a lot about a given topic, and they're just people that have come to the website that work for other companies.
Now, Adam, for XML information in general, if I was wanting to take and do XML programming in preparatory to doing BizTalk or understanding BizTalk better, perhaps, I know that there's msdn.microsoft.com/XML. Is that the best place for developers to go?
Yes, that is the best place. We are increasingly centralizing all of our technical information into that location.
Well, thanks a lot. I mean, I'm sure you guys have clarified a lot of issues that people might have with XML, given them some ideas to think about in their own application development. The architecture of XML and of BizTalk, I think, is very important moving forward. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of this, and our audience will be working a lot more with that. Now, this only deals with half of the issue, understanding the architecture of it. The other half is actually understanding the programming parts of it, and as long as our audience doesn't go anyplace, we'll be coming back to that in just a few seconds.
Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the news. With today being the first day of the new millennium, we wanted to show you some scenes from around the country to see just how everyone is adjusting to the year 2000. First up, a look at how it all got started last night in New York City.
New Year's Eve began in a fairly traditional way, and as the crystal ball descended in Times Square, people were celebrating the new year and the new millennium with great enthusiasm.
No one is quite sure what happened, but here in the heartland, we are on generator power today. From field reporter Dolores Johnson now, we have this report on how the rest of the country is faring.
Like the domino effect, the events occurring today are quite remarkable. Traffic in some metropolitan areas continues to be a bit confused. Bank patrons experienced cash flow problems. Even Cape Canaveral was unable to escape technical difficulties.
Charlie, give us some gas.
But in the nation's heartland, it was good to see people helping people.
We have plenty of candles and oil lamps for everyone. However, the charge card reader is down, so cash only, please.
Even the animal kingdom was not exempt from Y2K consequences. Backup communication systems were put into use.
Good morning, Mr. Lewis's office.
Hello, Mr. Lewis, please.
And police were called to quell a small riot at a local espresso stand because of lack of supplies.
Sorry, we're out of non-fat.
In a related story, there are reports from Las Vegas of everybody winning all the time. More details later in the broadcast. But right now, we are just receiving word that an official response to the Y2K crisis is coming down. Let's go live to Microsoft for the official announcement.
I'm here in a conference room on the Microsoft compound, and this room is just electric with excitement. I think they're about ready to make the announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, the answer to this Y2K problem is really quite simple. I've been able to reconfigure the dimensionality of the surface plane, thereby enabling a chain reaction to alleviate stress on the X-force, thus solving the Y2K problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Y2K solution. Thank you.
What is your thing about you?
Understanding how to incorporate XML in your solutions is more than just understanding some of the high-level architecture and system design capabilities that it employs. Adam and Dan did a very good job of providing you exactly why XML is around and what it can do for you, perhaps. But it really didn't dive into some of the actual programming aspects. When the rubber hits the road, what do you do? How does XML really help you solve your problems? Fortunately, we have Michael Edwards here. Michael Edwards is a program manager for MSDN Architecture Group, and he's actually developed some applications that use XML to solve problems in his workplace. Michael, so you've actually used XML to create a demo that solves a problem that you were actually faced with.
Yes.
What exactly went on there?
Well, it started with one of the worst two words I ever want to hear, and that's fire drill. My manager called me into his office and said, Michael, I've got another fire drill for you. And
you say that with such reverence.
Such reverence, yes. Well, the last time he gave us a fire drill, it was 2 days of wasted effort, essentially. And so my first response was absolutely no. I don't even want to hear it. And of course, I ended up hearing it.
Well, he's your manager.
He's my manager, so I had to kind of hear him out. Although I did get my kicks in first, just to let him know this is not going to be a good. Well, so he basically he said there's something we got to do, and I really think we've got to do it. It's a great opportunity. Todd Nielsen, the vice president for our division, asked us to do a demo to show a concept that was termed at the time mega services, and since then we've changed it to the name web services. And it was an idea that we wanted to explore about how a website can expose services to applications other than browsers, how they can take the functionality that they have on their site and expose that for use in new ways that people haven't even thought of.
No, I'm not quite sure I understand. What does that mean?
That's we have in today's world we create web applications, and those web applications expose functionality that through a browser.
Things
for
like
example,
a Barnes & Noble site or
for a catalog in that case, or you might go to the FedEx site and enter in a tracking number, and they'll dynamically serve you up a page that says, you know, your package landed in Kentucky last night, and it landed in King County Airport right now, was picked up, and, you know, you can get that kind of information. Well, why couldn't you send a tracking number to a company, to a UPS, and get back the data without having to use a browser, and
so
incorporate
not on
that.
a web page?
Not on a web page, in an application designed to incorporate services from multiple websites to create something new. We think that this is going to define sort of a revolution on the web, much like the web was a revolution to begin with. And in this case, I think it's going to be really neat because it's going to allow creativity to come in, and people will start envisioning things they can do that nobody thought of before, because they couldn't do those kinds of things before. And so we needed to come up with a demo to show that. And
you had how long?
We had 8 days. This was September 13th. At Developer Strategies Day was the day we were supposed to show this demo. We were showing it in Steve Ballmer's presentation. So if it doesn't work, then I'd be flipping burgers, you know. Yeah. And we had 8 days. So Vic said, kind of talked about some ideas that he had about what you might do in this service, to demonstrate this kind of services. And you have 1 day to tell me whether or not you can do it or not. You know, he told me I could say no, but Steve Ballmer, you know, I could. So I had a couple of days prior to that, another person in our organization had talked to me about what he felt was a great need to really show what BizTalk Server could do, and his idea in the enterprise in particular. And his idea was a corporate procurement application, which is sort of the definitive application that you need, that you can do online in a corporation, and, you know, procurement, supplies and stuff. So he had given me the name of Dan Rogers, and I hadn't contacted him yet. So I immediately called up Dan, described to him what we wanted to do, and Dan said, "Get down here." So me and 2 of my best developers went down there, down to his office, and talked to him for about an hour and a half. And he described the BizTalk toolkit and the things that it's designed to be able to do.
And that's something they just got through releasing.
Yeah, in fact, they announced it on September 13th.
So their deadline was the same deadline?
Same deadline we had. And we, you know, we thought briefly about using the toolkit, but, you know, we'd had to get a private drop from them, you know, and it's 8 days to their launch, and they probably, you know how that works. They had
zero time to help you.
They had 20 days of work. Yeah. So we just got from him basically the idea of what's in the toolkit, what can you do with it? And we're pretty good developers, and we figured that we could duplicate some of that functionality, especially if it was in a rather ad hoc way, and not in a way meant to be able to be released as a, you know,
so very narrowly focused specifically to what you're needing. Yeah. So we built a COM object which wraps an XML schema, wraps an instance of some XML schema, and we created a definition for a catalog. And we wrote the code that can parse that XML data and generate VB code. And XML to VB translator sort of thing? Or?
Basically, that would allow you to it would create the VB code, and we compile it in real time, register it in real time, and then we would have an object where you could set and get properties on this XML document, just as if it was any, you know, VB COM object that any VB programmer is used to dealing with. And that allowed us to really show the code behind this demo as being incredibly simple code. And it is. It's just literally a few lines of code, because we made working with that XML data super simple, because we used a paradigm everybody's familiar with, COM objects and properties, get and set properties. So it was kind of cool. It was a lot of fun.
So essentially the process then was to take a catalog style website and redirect it so it's exposing properties, methods, and events that a VB application could simply grab hold and call into.
And in addition, we also described methods that you could call to insert an order. So once you've looked at the catalog and selected an item, you want to be able to purchase that item. So you need to be able to execute a method on the website. Now that sounds kind of weird, but it's really pretty simple. In VB, we actually had a method. I mean, what that translates into in our case is it's merely making an ASP call on the website. you generate an HTTP request, you post a form with XML data, you got an ASP page that sits on that server, and parses out the XML data from that form, and then enters it into the system in their traditional ordering paradigm.
So essentially taking like a web form and treating it like a procedure call, a function call.
Very much like that. And, the payload of the form is XML data.
Yeah. So now you had 8 days to develop this in. Did you actually make your deadline?
We made it. We made it, and by just a whisker, literally. Didn't get much sleep. I remember the night before, we showed it to Steve the night before, and he hated the name Wega Services. Hate that name. Hate it. So we had to change it to Web Services. So, and we had to make a couple of little tweaks. And Robert was up till 2 or 3 in the morning, getting those last things fixed.
And the day of the demo,
the day of the demo, it worked. Our demo was, well, it didn't. Our laptop went on standby.
Oh.
Literally on the stage, and Vic turns to go to the laptop, and it's a black screen, and I'm like elbowing Robert, get up there now.
So it was a hardware problem with the laptop.
Hardware problem.
It had nothing to do with your demo then. Well, I mean, it sounds like an exciting demo, perhaps. Doing all this catalog sort of stuff. XML. Can we take a look at it, perhaps?
Yeah, let's do. I've got it here on my laptop. This is my Outlook Today view. You see this. This is your roll-up of your calendar. Now this is just an HTML page that the Outlook Today team created, and they created with the idea that it could be customized. And from this page, you can use the Outlook from HTML. On this page, you can access the Outlook Today or the Outlook 2000 programmability model. So I can access objects in Outlook 2000 and programmatically talk to them. So what I did was I created this extra view here, this gifts view, which is not part of the normal Outlook Today view. And the HTML behind this is going out into my Outlook Today calendar a couple of months in advance, and it's looking for birthdays and anniversaries. When you create a contact entry in Outlook 2000, you can indicate that person's birthday, and you can indicate their anniversary. And when you do that and you save and close that contact view, then it automatically creates a calendar entry for that on that date recurring. So we just go out and look for those the recurrences of those dates in the very near future, and we put onto this page a mechanism to be able to purchase a gift for that person.
And it took you 8 days just to do that.
It took, yeah, so long. It's just about 10 lines of HTML. And so I'm going to click this purchase gift, and I'm going to get a gift for my anniversary that's coming up here soon. And that's going to launch a new HTML page inside of Outlook Today. And now what we have here is a catalog view of a couple of websites, Pier 1 Imports and Sharper Image. And I can open up this view, and I can browse their catalog and decide if I want to purchase one of these things. And now, so far, you're not seeing anything that's altogether different than a browser going through the Pier 1 Imports website, except for that we see both sites here together. Now, what I can do, though, is I can modify that catalog and expose things that I want to see. So I want to buy some jewelry for my wife. Don't want to buy furniture. So now I'm looking at a reduced set of entries. I'm just looking at the catalog items that are described with a jewelry attribute. So in fact, Sharper Image only has one item that's considered a jewelry item. If you could consider a Navy SEAL watch, I don't think my wife would like that.
No, probably not.
So I'm going to go and look at the Nordstrom site, which I know she likes a lot. We buy a lot of stuff at Nordstrom.
And you're making it easier to buy even more.
I'm going to make it easier to buy anymore. I'm going to drop their URL onto this list box. And when I do that, we're going to capture the XML data that describes their catalog.
So your Visual Basic control was reaching out to the Nordstrom website and grabbing
getting that
the catalog.
XML, and since I was already scoped to jewelry, it's only displaying the jewelry items. So I can buy her a diamond pendant necklace, or I can buy her I love these pearls. That's just a gorgeous image.
Well, the picture's good anyway.
Yeah, it is. 10mm pearls, high luster, 50 of them, $600. So I can add that. I can add that at $640.93. And I can send this as a purchase order to the Nordstrom website from my application, which is not a browser. And
so it's not a web browser control you're hosting.
no, this is not the web browser control. This is a VB control. We put together a control that has all of these items in it because we are very good Visual Basic programmers, and we know that language pretty well.
And so to a certain extent, as far as your program that you wrote here is concerned, it was just executing a function call. And the website is now seeing that as a form submit.
Right. As a form submit, traditional HTTP form, it just so happens that the data in the form is XML. And the page on the site is an ASP page that knows how to receive HTML forms containing XML data subscribing to a particular XML schema that is valid according to a certain XML schema.
Now, is this the live Nordstrom site that you accessed here like this?
No, and in fact, this is the one part of the site that of this demo that we cheated on. All the code that you're seeing here is real, but in fact, Nordstrom doesn't yet expose a service like this.
So if Nordstrom or some other website were simply to take and add the appropriate XML things to their website that your application is expecting, immediately that application now could have been dragged and dropped into a control like this.
And we could start, then they could expose their catalog or any service. I mean, we're showing catalogs, but there's other services on there's thousands of websites out there, and they're doing all kinds of things, very, valuable services that they could expose through XML so that other applications besides a user interface in a browser could access those services. And in fact, those services could be stitched together to provide something brand new that you can't even do in a browser at all, or would be difficult to do.
Similar to like right here, you combine 3 catalogs at once.
We've combined 3 catalogs. We've scoped them to jewelry. We also will take advantage of the fact that Outlook today is knowledgeable about my MSN passport data, so I'm not going to have to type in my billing address and my credit card, and I'm already validated. So
as long as you properly authenticated yourself to the system when you logged in.
I logged in and I provided my user ID. I'll send that now, and we'll send it to the Nordstrom website, and we'll populate that purchase order with the data from this item and the data from my billing information.
Now, exactly how difficult is this code that we just showed off here to write and work with?
Well, actually, the code that did that is literally just a few lines of code. Because what we did was we wrote a COM object that will take that XML data and wrap it so that you can access it through your traditional property and method model that you're used to in VB. So I can show you the Visual Basic interface for this. I've got a Visual Basic project here, and I just want to show you that this is real code. So I'm gonna actually, before I do that, I need to bring in the web services add-on that we created for this. So I'm going to go to the add-in manager, and this is a VB component we wrote in a couple of days, and I'm going to add it to this project so it's loaded. And now we're getting that, we're loading that project, so we're going to extend the Visual Basic development environment.
So this piece of thing here,
this is brand new.
This is the code that you wrote in that 8 days.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And this is modeling after some similar things that you can do with the BizTalk toolkit, but we had to do it ourselves because we just didn't have time. So we've got some catalog data here already. We've got, and I'm gonna, oh, here, excuse me, I wanted to just prove to you this is really working. So I'm going to create a catalog variable, and I wanted the Nordstrom catalog variable and object, and you'll notice that it's not there. There's no ends even at all. So now I'm going to go over to the Nordstrom. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag and drop it, and we're going to recognize the URL, and we're going to load the catalog, and we're going to wrap it. We're going to build a Visual Basic object in the background that will wrap that catalog and allow us to program to it. So I'm going to drop it now.
So that's looking at the website, identifying the properties, methods, and events that are exposed by that website through XML, and incorporating them in a VB control on your project.
VB object. Yep. So now I'll come back. Now I've loaded that Nordstrom site, and now when I hit, let me just start that again, I'll see the Nordstrom Web Services. I now have that object registered on my system, and I can program to it. So I'll choose Nordstrom Web Services, and I'll choose their browse catalog. And so now I can access the mycat variable, and I can order jewelry. I can purchase jewelry. I can order one item, the pearl necklace. And now I can add information about my billing and my credit card from the passport service and execute a method on that object and have that XML sent onto the server.
So, I mean, it looks extremely simple. I mean, the hardest part was the code that you had to write that now is part of the BizTalk toolkit, or similar to what's going on in the BizTalk toolkit and stuff like that. So that makes it extremely easy for some other application developer to wrap the website's services in properties, methods, and events and expose them to their Visual Basic code.
Right. And there's also some tools in the toolkit that allow you to do some things. For example, if I really were creating a application that would allow me to browse multiple catalogs, when the websites of today start exposing, those that decide to expose catalogs, and maybe they might only be able to do it in a certain way, or that, you know, it's not realistic to think that all of these web stores are going to arrive at one catalog definition or one purchase order definition. So presumably they're all going to have different ones or slightly different. And I don't want to have to write to all of them. So one of the tools in the BizTalk toolkit allows you to map purchase order schemas or any schema. So I could, for example, in my application arrive at sort of a common denominator of a purchase order and a common denominator for a catalog.
So kind of exposing the fields you want to show in your Visual Basic application.
That I code to in my VB app. And then I could use that toolkit application, that utility, to create mapping, so that when I get a purchase order of a certain type that I've already screened, then I can automatically map that into the format that my program is conversant in.
Well, it sounds like I mean, for XML to be implemented and utilized by solution developers, we have two different types of people we're targeting. We have the solution providers, like the Nordstrom website and stuff like that, that is, maybe they don't actually write any code themselves, they're just taking and wrapping XML layers around their website. And then we have the consumers of those services that is writing a Visual Basic or C++ application that is reaching out and touching the websites, grabbing the services, enumerating them, and providing access to them. As folks are trying to get involved in XML and actually solving real problems in their real life, whether it's doing a fire drill like what you had to do, or actually trying to create a solution they're going to deliver and sell to people, what are some of the important things that they need to know about and understand in order to really grasp what XML can do for them?
Right. Well, the main thing that I would like to communicate is that XML really is the language that allows you to expose these kinds of services. So in this new world where websites can expose some of their services to other things than browsers, that's going to be XML. That's going to be the lingua franca of this new paradigm. And so the more you can learn about XML today, the better you're going to be able to play in this new world tomorrow. The second thing that I would really want to emphasize is that, and it kind of follows up on Adam's comments earlier, he talked about how XML is a lot of things to a lot of people, and it's capable of doing very many different kinds of things. That's really true. In fact, in my group, the MSDN architecture team, every single sample we're creating uses XML in some fashion.
Now, is that by design?
By design, because it just makes sense. It's it's easier to do. It's really the way that we would do it if, you know, it's kind of cool.
So it's not like someone came down to you and said, you will use XML. It's kind of like you're looking at XML and saying, hey, this solves a problem.
This solves a problem. In particular, this demo was an excellent example of that. My boss, Vic, didn't say, oh, by the way, it's got to be XML. It's got to be BizTalk. He said, we want to show web services. Go figure it out. You know, and we went off and thought, BizTalk, XML. That will make this easy.
So once you understand the XML and how it's going to fit into your world, are there specific resources you want to point people at to get information to read up on and find out more?
Well, I actually literally went to the BizTalk site to get started. I went to the BizTalk, www.biztalk.org, and I went to the resources page. They have some links that point directly into specific areas of the MSDN XML Development Center. There's a set of documentation about XML schema. There's object references for the parser. and they pointed directly into those. There's also a set of white papers that describe the BizTalk philosophy and the framework and how you wrap XML with a BizTalk envelope. So that's really where I started, and I recommend people start.
Well, thanks, Michael. I mean, I'll let you get busy on your next fire drill. No more fire drills.
No.
Okay. Well, hopefully the information we provided to you, whether from an architecture, system design, or even from a programmer standpoint, is something that can assist you in solving some of your problems you're facing in your day-to-day work efforts. XML is an extremely important technology that's coming out, and I'm sure we've just touched the tip of the iceberg here in providing you just a glimmer of what XML can do for you. At the end of the transcript page associated with this show, you'll find a lot of links associated with other information, whether it's URLs that Michael was talking about, places on the www.biztalk.org site, or on MSDNMicrosoft.com, where you can go to find more information, samples, schema diagrams, and so forth on XML and BizTalk. Thanks for watching. One of the things I'd like to do on these episodes is kind of share with you a bit about what Microsoft is like kind of behind the scenes. And to do that, it's important to share with you what the people are like, the individuals, the people in the trenches that are actually performing a lot of the duties that maybe you see, maybe you don't see. As developers, no doubt, you've attended some of the technical events that Microsoft has put on. Someone that works really hard behind the scenes of these technical events that whether you know it or not, you've had interaction with, is Joan Ashino. So I'd like to kind of talk with her a bit and find out more about who Joan is, what she's doing at the company, and how she came to this position and what she's doing in her personal life, perhaps. Unfortunately, right now she's in a meeting, so we can't just kind of barge in and interrupt her. But like any well-oiled company like Microsoft is, all of our meetings always get out exactly on time, which means right about now.
Services. This thing is quite fascinating.
Rearrange a meeting around 3 or so.
Yeah, that works for me.
Looks like Joan's still in there. Let's go talk with her. Joan, if you have a second, I'd like to kind of chat with you for a bit.
Sure.
I've already been taking and talking with some of the audience about your involvement in technical conferences and so forth. Maybe you can kind of fill in a little bit of details exactly, you know, what is your involvement in technical conference? How do you take and interact with the developers that Microsoft talks with?
Well, my team manages all the developer trade shows and conferences. So we do our presence at Comdex, Internet World, and we just finished Dev Days in 32 cities in the US and Canada. And we also do PDCs, Tech Eds. One of the fun parts is we get to do the evening entertainment.
Evening entertainment, meaning?
Meaning we usually have a party one night during the developer conference. So we get to hire bands or comedians. So recently we've
Maybe like geeky bands and geeky comedians?
No, Penn and Teller, Sinbad, Tower of Power, Faith Hill to McGraw. So that's kind of the fun side of my job. We get to meet them.
So besides some of the technical events you do, is there anything else inside of Microsoft that you're focusing on?
Oh, we do some product launches. So that's always fun. We did the launch of the DirectX technologies a few years ago. That was on Halloween.
And what did that entail?
It was a haunted house and a trade show and a brief product demonstration that rolled into kind of this big trade show party haunted house thing. And we actually did it in the parking garage over at our Red West facility. And it was really fun. All the vendors, the exhibitors dressed their booths up and they all were in costume. And we did this huge haunted house and it was great fun.
Outside of Microsoft, I mean, I'm assuming you do have a life outside of Microsoft.
Sometimes.
What sort of things do you participate in? Are you on the computer all the time and dealing with technical issues when you're not working?
No, I'm not. Outside of Microsoft, I like to scuba dive.
Scuba dive?
And in fact, I'm getting on a plane in a day and heading to Kauai to go do some diving out there.
What do you plan Joan Ashino is doing in the future?
Gosh, I'd like to get more involved with some nonprofit organizations in my spare time.
Such as?
I do some stuff right now with like the Make-A-Wish Foundation or a foundation called ACRS. It's the Asian Counseling and Referral Service.
What does that entail? What are those two things?
Well, Make-A-Wish Foundation grants wishes to children who are terminally ill. And so that's real fulfilling. It's kind of a hard job, but it's real fulfilling to do something really nice for a kid who's had a really tough time.
And what was the other organization?
ACRS is the Asian Counseling and Referral Service, and I've been doing just a few things with them.
And what does that entail?
It's a service organization, social service organization for the Asian community in Seattle.
So what actually got you started here at Microsoft? When did you first come in?
Wow, I've been at Microsoft for about 12 and a half years, and I started out as Paul Maritz's first admin in the company when he first moved over from Intel.
And why did you come to Microsoft?
I've always known that it was the place I wanted to be. So it was a great opportunity to get my foot in the door, and as an admin I really learned a lot about all the different areas of the company, which really helped me focus on what group I wanted to work with, and decided that development was where I wanted to be. And one of the great things when I first started at Microsoft, about a week into the job, Microsoft was just 4 buildings at the time. I was coming out of the building 2 cafeteria, walked around the corner, smack dab into Bill, knocked him down. And I still have my job.
Not like actually physically knocked him down?
Knocked him down off of his feet, on the floor. I was standing, he was on the floor.
So do you talk to him about that ever?
No, we don't mention that.
Okay. If there's something that you think you personally bring to these developers at these conferences to look at, what would you say that would be?
Well, I guess my entire team, everyone's really committed to bringing the best developer events possible, making it just the most complete educational event, easy for them logistic-wise, just the overall experience. And something that's really important to us is making sure that the developer community knows how supportive Microsoft is of them, and that all of our efforts, whether it's an event, MSDN, our product offerings, everything, that we're just trying to make it as easy for them as possible.
Well, thank you, Joan. I really appreciate talking with you and spending the time with us. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it as well, and maybe they've got a little better idea of what people are like inside of Microsoft.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for joining us. This broadcast has been a lot of fun to share this technical information with you. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot of great information about how you can use XML and BizTalk in the solutions you're developing to make them that much better. If you notice in the transcript window, at the very bottom are a series of links to other information and resources that we think you'll find useful in your development efforts. Also, pay attention to the MSDN website to find out more information about when upcoming shows are going to happen and what their topics are going to be about. Hope to see you then, and take care.